Hi Mechthild, we know quite a long time. You are a long-time friend of Herbert. You will come to the summit this year, and I'm happy to have a talk to you before this event, just talking a bit about your own history and how you get into the computer media art scenery. Your work began in Berlin, you studied there, you are German originally. So how did it come that you were interested in media art?
Okay, hello Susanne. Thank you for inviting me to this interview and of course to the show. And I'm honored to be part of the group of friends of Herbert. So my path into media art was gradual, I would say. I started with regular painting in Berlin, but I always liked materials. I was interested in artistic photography. I was interested in innovations. But I started towards the end of my studies, I started to mix in some other media, let's say photocopies, photographs, some assemblage elements. And I took a video class by an American visiting artist at the UDK. And that got me interested in video. And I was trying to do both, but there was always a problem. How do you display video, which needs a darker environment, and painting, which needs light? How do you bring these together? And so I was looking for something like, how can I do both? I didn't want to give up painting. And there was sort of an amazing moment right after my studies, I believe in 82 or so. I went to a video studio and they had 3 electronic crayons, and you could actually use a crayon and draw directly on the glass of the monitor that would be recorded. And I thought it was really crude, but it was fantastic. So I thought I have to try to pursue this further. So whenever I read something about ways to combine video and painting, I even tried to paint with a magnifying glass on Super 8. So that's anything but generative art, but just trying to bring these media together. And then that was my way eventually into 3D animation, which I did for a while. I had to make a living. The problem was early on that all these machines were extremely expensive. So to give you an example, the FGS 4000 at the time cost like $300,000, just the basics. But by the time you bought all the peripherals, it was like $500,000, and it needed its own air conditioning system as big as a refrigerator. So you could not have one at home like we can today. So I worked for companies, but then I worked for companies that let me use all the equipment for free at night or on weekends. And for 2 years, I worked at Ari in Munich, and they were extremely generous supporting me. They supported me putting up a whole theater play, Amphitryon, the one that I sent you the link for, and let me use the whole studio and the editing suite and several people who worked on it with me. So I must make a little shout out that there's some really generous commercial companies that were supporting artists, and that was the only way I could do it at the time. And so I stayed with that. For a long time, I kept painting and video art next to each other, but eventually my paintings are like my sentimentally long lost children that hang on the wall. And, I still do some drawings and things like that, but my main work is on a computer now. And of course, today we can have this all, we have easy access to all these tools. So that's a very rough description how I got to that. I should add that during this time in Munich, I worked at Ari for 2 years, and I was doing some first workshops teaching at the Art Academy. And through those people, that's how I met Herbert. And
okay. Interesting.
I know you have some questions about that.
Okay, but let's stay a bit with your biography right now, because I would like to know, you nowadays you are an artist, you are working as an artist on one side, but you are also doing education, you are at a university. So how does it fit together, and how do you see these two fields in your own life?
I think that is actually a great combination. I was working commercially for a while, and that's extremely time intensive, but it was perfect during the time where, you know, you could not afford your own machines and so on. But when I found that I really love communicating about the whole history of this medium. And if you work in, let's say, broadcast or advertising, the history is not really important. And I always taught a few classes on the side, but I wanted to see the trajectory of a student. You know, how do they develop from when they start and when they stop, let's say 4 years later or so. And also the academic environment gave me more of an opportunity and more time to do research and to work on my own work and to also integrate some of my work into my teaching. So for me, that was an ideal combination, because making a living of video art is extremely hard. I would say there are fewer video artists that live off their art than there are painters. So because it's an ephemeral medium, and there are not many people who want to pay for that.
You are looking back to the development of generative art for quite a few decades. So I would like to know from your side where you see the milestones, or how do you feel it has developed, and especially also your own work, how did it develop during the time?
I mean, the very early times of generative art, the pioneers like Herbert in the 1950s, I wasn't aware. I wasn't even aware that I was born in the mid to late 1950s. So it took a while for me to understand where this art was coming from. And I always like to have the artist's handwriting in the art, whether it's video or whether it's painting or anything. So I was more interested in something that mixes some live, some textures, but that mixes the different art forms. And like in Amphitryon, where you have live actors and then computer animation, and try to build a new environment of both of them together. But I have very big appreciation and respect for all the artists that is more generated by programming. I don't come from programming. I know some basics about programming, enough to understand what other people are doing, but I'm not using that in my own art. So that came more from a figurative side, through photography, through video, and sort of more expressive painting and the interest in movement. And mostly I was interested in this art form because I thought it's a new medium. And I saw that in the beginning, there were like really very weak examples of how, for instance, computer animation was used. And I thought that artists should have a role in the development of that medium and in the development of the aesthetic of that medium. Otherwise, you just leave it to commercial interest or to amateurs who don't have a background in either, you know, fine arts or commercial arts. So, and I thought this is an art form that is symbolizing what we are about in the then 20th century. And what defines the 20th century is really, you know, the emergence of computers in all parts of our lives. So I don't want to dismiss painting, but I thought this was a new form of expression, and there should be an artistic expression that is part of that. That was my interest. And that continues to a degree with generative art and with NFTs and so on. You see, you know, there are always Babykrankheiten when you start an art form, and there's terrible work out there. I don't even want to call it art. They're just like I don't know, imitations from the Mona Lisa or something. So I think it is even more important that artists are involved in shaping this new medium and create something that is actually culturally valuable and that is an expression of our times. That is sort of the art historical interest in doing this, and also in making it.
So this was already something like a summary of what you feel is generative art, the core of generative art?
I think that goes a little further. I have a little bit more to say about that, but you were interested in the history. So, and as a form in that history, I think we are also widening an expression of what art is. You know, it is not a single artist working on a single form of expression, but even that wasn't necessarily the case earlier on. There were artist workshops, you know, even if you look at who worked with Michelangelo or who worked with Leonardo da Vinci, there wasn't just always one person involved. So there has always been art that has been created by more than one person, but maybe under the guidance of one person. And that is sort of how I see generative art. It is the artist who guides the process, but the artist has to be able to steer the process and have an understanding of the underlying logic to a degree, because otherwise he or she cannot steer it, but it's just like playing around and seeing what the computer throws at you, you know.
Just one.
I think, you know, yeah, okay.
One question for that, because Herbert always stressed that it is technology that a generative artist is using. So he's using technological tools to produce art. Would you agree on that? Because so far the word technology did not show up in your words right now. You could interpret it in this way, but I just wanted to be sure. What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, I mean, I call it a medium, and a medium is, in this case, a technology, whether it's a camera or a computer or something generative. The point was more when we look at something generative, we use these tools to make something artistic. And it is important to have these tools, whether it is a computer or whether it is a camera or other means of expression. And I think we have, what has changed in art, that we look at art in a much wider perspective. So it is not just the artist with a paintbrush in her hand, but it's also the person who feeds a computer program and generates art with that, knowing what that computer program could possibly generate. That's of course an element of coincidence in there. But so I think early on, many people had difficulty accepting that a computer is an artistic tool, but it is, whether you use a painting software or whether you go further down and on a much more, I would say, technological level, use the actual code as something where you generate art. And I think that is accepted now, but in the art world, it took a while for that to be accepted. But now when we're looking at computer pioneers and exhibitions of people like Herbert, I think there's an understanding that they were actually the initiators of bringing this kind of technology and coding into the art realm.
So I would like to talk to you a bit about artificial intelligence, because this is the newest tool of artists, but it brings in maybe a newer aspect in it, because artificial intelligence needs a neural network, and a neural network is operated by information that is collected before, and it is collected by artwork that is done before. So there we have to discuss the subject, who is the artist? You know, is it the artist using open AI or other artificial intelligence tools, and or which role has the machine, and also the works behind the machine?
Yeah, this is a very complicated topic, and I'm not assuming I have the answer because it's all in development. I just had a discussion in my class at NYU with my students about that, who are worried that their jobs will go away, but other discussions also. I think you cannot put the, once it is started, you cannot stop it or put it back in the box. It will be very difficult to control. We can try to control artificial intelligence. I also mean in a wider scope for legal reasons or, manipulation in media and so on. Just like any tool, it gives us a lot of power. And I think the tools are getting more and more powerful. So they actually require an increased responsibility on part of the user, whether that's technology, science, or art. And also legally, what are the ramifications, what are the limitations? But that has to be controlled on a global scale. So I don't see that happening, because you can make laws in Germany, you can make laws in the US, but since it's a global system, if it's not respected everywhere in the world or enforced everywhere in the world, you're helpless against that. So I think it's extremely important that we are informed about artificial intelligence, and that we have media literacy about artificial intelligence to tell right from wrong. And that will not always be easy. I think it can be an interesting field for artistic expression, but I have one very big caveat, and that is mainly for also crypto art, which relies on something similar. Anything that requires huge amounts of calculations, that means it also increases our carbon footprint, and by a lot. This is not a little bit. For instance, there's a power plant in upstate New York that has been turned back on. It uses as much energy as a whole small town only for crypto, for Bitcoin. There are other ways to create NFTs and works of art in that area that are not so energy intensive. But so I think, as someone who's very concerned about climate change, we cannot further and support the use of art that will actually contribute to our demise. So I think we have to know what kind of technology our work is based on, and we have to use the technology that is responsible about its energy use. So that to me has priority over the artworks that are being expressed with it, because it is suicidal to use that much energy and more energy. I'm really concerned about that. Artistically, I think it can be interesting. And I think, as always, it is good, as in the emergence of, let's say, 3D animation and computer-generated art in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and so on. It is important that artists are part of the voice that is exploring this and that is generating it, because it is an expression of our times. And it can be interesting. And I think I've seen a few exhibitions, and I cannot think of the name of the artist right now, but I saw a really good show here in a gallery that was based on artificial intelligence. I think it can have its own expression, not just a regurgitation of former art that is just piled together in a new artwork. But I think we have to not give up control over art and over generating art, because if art became just a repetition and a new recombination of artworks that already exist in history, then we would wind up with some of these, vanilla versions of art that are just kitschy, that seem like airbrushed corny somethings without it somehow missing the soul. So we have to find a way to keep the soul in all that machine generated art. And yeah, that says it.